Alrighty. Okay, so we're gonna get started today with our ageless education session. This is our third session of this weekend, and we have here today Dr. Julie Hinman. She has 2 decades of experience in healthcare. Her background spans family practice and emergency medicine. As a founder of the Complete Metabolic Reset for Weight Loss, Dr. Hinman leverages her extensive education and personal health journey to help others. Her expertise expands longevity and functional medicine, weight loss, gut health, and autoimmunity. Through her work, she is committed to optimizing health and wellness for individuals and communities alike. So please help me welcome Dr. Hinman.
Thank you. Let me test. Am mic okay? I can hear it now. Thank you. Well, thank you all so much for having me. It's truly an honor to be here today, to be speaking to you all, the people in the limited community, in large part because you guys get it. Like, you get health and wellness. And I learned when I arrived today that this is day 3. So talk about committed to your health and wellness, your journey through this. I love that and I appreciate that. And I'll say that, a little background about myself. I entered medicine because I thought that the physicians, the medical community had all the answers when I started. And a little laugh there. Yeah, I was really dismayed actually as I became a patient in my early 20s, like my mid 20s. And it really motivated me to seek a lot of the answers that aren't available with the maybe traditional model and pursue more functional medicine. And so I love, again, finding others who really value and appreciate the functional medicine and longevity approach to health and wellness, because it is not the same as a traditional model. So again, I'm a family nurse practitioner. I have a doctorate and a master's degree from the University of Arizona. And I like to say I grew up in traditional medicine. I practiced traditional medicine, and people never really seem to get better in that environment. And so again, back in 2018, I launched my practice and began working and seeing patients and helping them optimize their health and really understand what was happening inside of their health and their wellness. And had that clicker and then I forgot it, guys. So sorry.
But you're standing and just.
Okay, we are ready, and people are still getting settled. So, a big topic around in the media, in the news, and I think also happening within the medical offices right now around GLP medications and GLP-1s. And so today I want to talk about the medication. I want to talk about some of the benefits, and then also kind of how we're using it in clinical practice. I think people have a lot of questions. Is it right for me? When is it right? Where do I get it? Who can I trust? And so I've got some stories to go along with this, but also to kind of help you understand what are these medications, how are they utilized, and who are they for? That's okay. Mariana's here. She told me she's here. Um, so, what are GLP and GIP medications? So, glucagon-like peptide. A peptide is a chain of amino acids, and they're strung together and in smaller molecules that make up a hormone. So that's not really important. I guess the important thing to take away from that is that your body actually makes compounds like these GIP and GLP medications, and that's actually why they've literally changed the landscape when it comes to how we're managing patients who are maybe pre-diabetic or diabetic or having problems with weight loss. And so this is a peptide that your body makes, and that's why they're not only very well tolerated, they've been proven to be extremely safe, and the data is not just the blood sugar lowering benefits, but also it extends beyond that. And those are some of the topics that we're going to talk about today. So medications, you may hear the term Ozempic, but that structure is actually semaglutide. So the generic form is the trade name by the drug company. I believe that one's the Pfizer. is Ozempic or Wegovy. Ozempic is approved for diabetes treatment. Wegovy has been approved for treatment of obesity. And so it was the first of its kind. And that's why in 2021, we started hearing more information thanks to some, prominent media figures like Kim Kardashian, who all of a sudden lost a tremendous amount of weight. And it was suspected to be due to these medications. So tirzepatide is like a cousin of semaglutide. It's a newer medication. It has two different pathways and mechanisms of action, but it really is, you could think along the same lines. These are very similar medications, and they work in very similar ways. Like I mentioned before, they're approved for the treatment of type 2 diabetes, and they also have recently been approved for weight loss. Okay? You may have seen some information in the media when it comes to these medications. Everything from wonder drugs on one hand to, on the other hand, things like paralyzed intestines and all types of troubles. So again, I think just to we'll answer some of those questions, but the media's job, I think, is to sensationalize things many times. And so that definitely, we've seen a lot of that in the media. All right, so to get into the surprising benefits of GLP-1 and GLP medications. So interestingly, these drugs, I wasn't really, I'll kind of share a little bit about my background and my experience. The first time I ever was introduced to these medications was probably around 2008 when I was a student, and I was inside of a medical office, and there was a drug rep that was there that day. And his goal was to promote this new medication. He said, give this to your diabetic patients. They will love you. And I said, well, why? He said, well, they're going to lose weight, and they will love you, and they will stick to their medication because they are losing weight on it. And this was back in 2008, 2009 that I can recall. The first drug was approved in 2005, just so you understand how long we've been using these medications. They're not necessarily new, even though they're made to be maybe promoted that way in the media. So indeed, they were helpful, extremely helpful for weight loss. And in 2021, we saw that the FDA first approved semaglutide or Ozempic for use in weight loss. So as people began using the medications, what we've started to see is that it's not just weight loss, that there are some dramatic improvements and other reasons to be using GLP and GLP-1 medications. Of course, the glucose-lowering benefits, which our blood sugar is thought to, elevated blood sugar is thought to largely drive the inflammatory process. And I know that you all have heard that term inflammaging, right, from your presenters before. But inflammaging, our body is a divine and wonderful system. No matter what your basis and foundation in that belief, our body intends to always heal itself through the inflammation process. However, though, that inflammation can be driven by things like sugar in our diet, stress in our lifestyle, lack of sleep, toxins in our environment. Many of these things are things that we can do little about and sometimes a lot about. And so when we see the glucose-lowering benefits associated with these medications, it has a lot to do with the inflammatory process and how these drugs work. Some of that known and understood very well, and others, I'd say we were kind of on the forefront to really understanding why are these drugs having such a tremendous impact across so many systems. So interestingly, with the glucose-lowering benefits, some of the wonderful effects have been weight loss. And so about 14.9% of weight loss has occurred due to these medications, which compared to a placebo group that didn't receive the medications, about 2.3%. So prior to the medications, I used to tell my patients, nutrition, lifestyle, and that does a great, I'm looking at Alana here, right? We can do a lot of that, and a lot of it is within our resources to do. However, some of it, I would say, we can go to the gym. For many people, they can go to the gym, they can exercise, and that weight loss is maybe just not as achievable as they would like. And so with this study group, this is over a 3-year study, the individuals lost on average 14.9%, again, compared to the placebo group. I did the math just so you kind of understood what that looked like. And for a 220-pound individual, now I'm wondering where I am on my notes. There it is, 33-pound weight loss. So this is like significant amount of weight that individuals are losing with these drugs. And also to discuss those glucose lowering benefits, have you been told to check your A1C, or you know your A1C, right? That's the 3-month average with our blood sugar. We should really be concerned about that. The goal is for it to be, in my opinion, 5.4 or below, far below the pre-diabetic range. But for the diabetic range, 5.7 to 6.4. 6.5 and above is technically diabetes, but these groups saw a 1.6% reduction in their blood sugar, which is monumental. If I've ever had a patient come back and been able to reduce their A1C, it is just, to that level, is a tremendous impact because of the inflammation that is associated with increased and elevated blood sugar. Interestingly, this is where I think that this MACE cardiovascular event reduction is where a lot of traditional healthcare providers, your kind of regular primary care, your endocrinologists have really bought into these drugs because of the impact that these medications have had when it comes to cardiovascular disease. Initially, there was research that was put out, was like, okay, is this safe for the heart? I think that they intended that they were going to find out that these drugs were actually not safe from a cardiovascular standpoint. But when it comes down to it, the blood sugar impact was truly what drove the benefits. And so you understand what this means. The incidence of cardiovascular disease is 3 times higher for people who have problems with their blood sugar than those who don't. So what it means is that our top priority should be, from a longevity standpoint and from a health standpoint, should be controlling blood sugar, always. 2 tests. You're used to your doctor running that hemoglobin A1C and looking at a fasting glucose. Another elevated step that we like to do from a longevity perspective is make sure you know what your fasting insulin is. Make sure you know what your inflammatory markers are. These are easy tests, and they can be ordered. I mean, again, this is not like you have to go to a specialty lab. This can be done through SnoreQuest at your routine visit. So if your primary care doctor isn't on board, advocate for a functional medicine-minded provider who's willing to do these tests for you. Other additional benefits, and I think that the lower blood pressure actually comes from the weight loss that's associated with these medications. It can maybe be at the vascular level as well, that blood pressure is lowered. But interestingly, improved cholesterol markers as well. So many benefits to these medications, these drugs. Okay, who all has heard in the last 6 months that type 3 diabetes? Yeah. So, we used to think that Alzheimer's disease and our memory was like our genetics, right? We know that that's not the case. This also goes back to blood sugar. So when we start controlling the blood sugar in a more active way with these medications, we can see tremendous impacts from a neuro and cognitive perspective as well. And so we're saying may reduce the risk of neurodegenerative diseases. I would say arguably it does decrease the risk of neurodegenerative diseases. And the pathway, again, is blood sugar, insulin, and inflammation. Okay, that's how these medications are really having these tremendous impacts. If I could get my aging 76-year-old father-in-law to do one thing, this guy is, he's a workhorse in the yard, just on the property, doing so much for himself. But he has a bowl of ice cream every single day. And he's unfortunately, he's losing his cognitive abilities, and it's so sad. But man, I'm going to have to rip that ice cream out of his cold, dead hand, because he's just not going to give it up. But again, blood sugar control. And for him, from a longevity standpoint, is, in my mind, controlling that. How could we do that? He won't give up the ice cream. Could we maybe give him some of these drugs to help improve blood sugar, maybe some supplements to help improve blood sugar, and make sure that he stays active in the yard and with it as much as possible? Absolutely. So again, mechanism is reduction of brain inflammation and oxidative stress. Many people have gone on to report mood improvement, cognitive function while on these medications. So a great story, because I love putting stories to to the delivery of this information, because it's kind of hard to follow. It's a lot of medical terms. Um, I had a patient who came to me. She was 42, has 3 kids, owns a business. She's a caterer, and she wanted to lose some weight. She's been going to the gym. She has a pretty active lifestyle. She's struggling very much so. We put her on these medications. Her other history was she had ADHD. She had been diagnosed and had been medicated for ADHD since she was a teenager. So she had been on Adderall for like 23 years, right? Okay, so, but she had to focus. Like, she needed the medicine so she could focus, and but she hated taking it. So she noticed after being on uh, she was on semaglutide. She noticed after being on the semaglutide that she had gone like 2 weeks and hadn't had to take her Adderall. And so this woman achieved her weight loss, and she said, my goal in the beginning with these drugs was to take people off, right? Because we didn't, when we first started these medications myself, I didn't have all of the research to say how helpful is it from a longevity perspective. So for her, she came, and I think she thought I was going to take away her medicine. And she said, I'm doing so well on these medications, and I haven't needed to fill my Adderall. Can I please stay on it? 100%. Absolutely. Would I rather give you a medication like semaglutide that has all of these benefits than a medication that's a controlled substance, right? People abuse Adderall. It increases and heightens our, stress response, our cortisol. Do people need it to, some people do need it. But ideally, we can use a peptide that's similar in shape and structure. Your body recognize it and look at all of the benefits. So she has successfully been off of those medications for about a year, and she's just doing wonderfully. She's also maintaining her weight and feels like she has more control over her diet as well. So it's really, really beautiful. Of course, these are the main reasons leading into this next slide here is appetite regulation and weight loss. I would say, or I wouldn't say, these are the number one reasons why my patients actually come to me and seek out these drugs is for appetite regulation and for weight loss. If you haven't heard the latest information and research on obesity and overweight, about 76% of our US population falls into the overweight and obese ranges. And it is one of the things that is driving our chronic disease, our healthcare costs, and of course, taking people's lives far sooner than they should. And so one of the benefits of the medications is it can have really great support as far as hunger and fullness goes. Most of our patients that are on it say they don't feel the need to snack in between meals, which is really wonderful because fasting is great for your health when done properly. And so they are craving less high-fat foods and sugary foods. And I would also say that, prior to these medications, when I was working in weight loss, it's really hard for patients to lose weight because we're saying, just muscle through it, just keep going. And when you don't have the energy and you're not necessarily seeing the scale change, it's really hard to stick with a routine, even if we know with all of the best intentions that we should be, doing the exercise and, eating the salad and doing all those things. So these medications have had a tremendous impact. And if people come to me for appetite and for weight loss, I'm actually happy because as a clinician, as a medical provider, guess what happens? Their blood pressure gets better, their cholesterol gets better, they start having the energy to pursue all of those health behaviors that we know that we need to do. And so it's just a beautiful thing. I would say it really has been a game changer because again, we're focused on nutrition and lifestyle and all of those health behaviors first, not just the medicine. Okay, so liver health. This is another unexpected benefit of semaglutide and these GLP medications. So the number one cause 2 decades ago for end stage liver or liver disease was an infection called hepatitis C. It was because our baby boomer generation, there was higher rates of shared, whether it was from a tattoo needle or from IV drug use, sex. So liver, chronic liver failure was actually hepatitis C related. And so we only saw it in certain populations of people and we screened for it. But in the last 2 decades, that has far been been far superseded by the development of fatty liver disease. Well, why do we get fatty liver disease? Processed food, high fat diets, and excess fat. And so the fat doesn't just accumulate in areas where we don't like to see it, like around the waist. It actually accumulates in our organs too, which is part of this whole inflammaging process. It can accumulate on our heart, on our liver, all throughout that visceral, we call that organ fat, visceral fat. And so one of the benefits to these medications has also been reduced liver fat concentration inside of the liver and improved liver function. So we're seeing that in patients as well, and it's fantastic. So definitely some long-term benefits from one of our vital organs. If we think about what the liver's process is, it's to detoxify. And so if we don't have adequate function of our liver, we are going to have other problems. One other really beautiful impact of these medications that we've recently learned has been our bone health. And so different mechanisms for, semaglutide or tirzepatide, but for many women, especially women, as we start to see that age-related hormonal decline and an increased prevalence of things like osteopenia and osteoporosis, that these medications can provide even an increased bone density or a kind of thwart off any further loss. So really, really wonderful. And of course, with that comes decreased risk for fractures. All right, so we've gone through like so many organs, brain, liver, right? Now we're up to in heart, and now we're to kidneys. So kidneys, again, are a filters all of our blood. Well, those kidneys, we know for patients who have elevated blood sugar, prediabetes, and diabetes, one of the consequences is chronic kidney disease. Another really important marker to pay attention to that's oftentimes on every one of your panels is your eGFR. That is how well your kidneys are functioning. And I would say looking at that number and making sure, wherever it may be, ideally it's above 80, optimal would be 90 to 100. But looking at that marker, and every year when you have your labs done, or if you're having those done quarterly, you should be looking at that marker so that you understand how have your kidneys aged from one marker to the next. Things like hydration, sugar in our diet, our blood pressure, very much impacts our kidney health. So with kidney protection, again, this comes from improved blood pressure, right? Because our kidneys are very sensitive to high blood pressure. So the GLP medications help to improve our blood pressure control, so less stress on the kidneys, and then again from the blood sugar impact on the vessels themselves. So improved kidney function. I have a patient who last week, I was looking at her markers, and she's 72. She's 72. And she's been on medications for weight loss, made a lot of healthy decisions and changed a lot of things. She's had a 20-pound weight loss in the last 10 months. And one of the benefits for her was that she actually had an 8-point increase from December of last year in her kidney function, which if we ask, again, traditional medicine, can we age in reverse? Say no, right? Because they don't see it often enough. But for this person, she definitely is showing signs of that reversal. And again, don't ever forget how powerful and incredible your body is. So kidney protection as well. So to kind of touch on again, kind of what we're seeing in clinical practice, I've mentioned some of those cases to you before or throughout the presentation today, but I would say the majority of people are coming because of their weight. And when we're finding things like diabetes or prediabetes, these are great medications. As a matter of fact, even the American Diabetic Association is now recommending that our first-line medication is metformin. You're probably familiar with that medicine. We used to then use other glucose-lowering medications orally, like glipizide, and then on to things like insulin. But we are now no longer recommending that because these drugs just have such a tremendous benefit and really, not any of the associated health risks when used properly. So they can be great. So again, weight loss for people who struggle with diet and exercise alone, I will never tell anyone that they can just use these drugs as a substitute for nutrition and lifestyle change. I think that when I see people lose the most amount of weight and have the greatest sustained results, it is because they have used these medications as a tool in their toolkit. They've met with professionals that can support them from a nutrition perspective. They've talked about their impact of their health from like a sleep and stress position. They are optimized from a nutrient perspective, whether that's the food that they're eating or the supplements that they're taking. And they're having, again, they're blowing all of the other people out of the water when it comes to how they're using the medications. It's also the pride that people feel, right? It's really hard to make nutrition and lifestyle changes, and many people or most people have struggled and probably failed at nearly every diet or sustaining weight loss for long periods of time. And so it's really great when you have a person who suddenly has results and is like, I can do it. I can stick to that gym routine. I can stick to the nutrition routine. And they feel really empowered by feeling better, right? So when we're eating better, we're moving better, we're sleeping better, we're feeling better, and we can sustain those changes over time. And again, it has been tremendous. I wanted to share with you when we first started that I was really kind of resistant to starting these medications 2.5 years ago. I really felt like patients could do it without any support. And when I saw these medications previously prescribed, it was for diabetes and for prediabetes. And so I had a woman who had really struggled. She's in her late 40s, early 50s now, and had tried all of the things, had had bariatric surgery, and had regained weight. That happens all of the time, unfortunately. And she practically begged me. She said, please give me these medications. And I said, all right. After a couple of no's, I finally said, yes, I'll do it. And only if you're willing to work with a nutritionist and with a trainer. And she agreed. So we put her on these medications, and she completely changed my mind. And as we've learned more and more about these medications, it has changed my thought on the drugs. And so I don't think there's any reason to fear these drugs. I think there's a lot of reason to fear a lot of medications, but not these medications, because they just have shown to be safe over time. And so again, seeing her change and seeing her energy increase and seeing all the other positive benefits and how she finally was able to take control and lose weight was truly a wonderful thing, and she's still doing great. So we talked a bit about obesity. The one takeaway that I really want you to understand and take away today is truly about the blood sugar, and how one of the top things, if you aren't already doing it, if you haven't heard this from your other speakers, which I think that you have, is around processed sugar and processed foods, processed grains. They're horrible for our health. Um, they're they're creating a lot of damage. And so again, we can remove those from our diet, but when it doesn't seem to be enough, having a conversation with a healthcare provider that you trust about these medications and whether or not they can work for you. To touch on who they're not for, as well as we wrap up, there's really only one indication where we don't give these medications, and it is for patients who have a family history of thyroid cancer. And so the only reason why that is we've seen in mice studies that it could increase the risk of thyroid carcinoma. And so we've just not done that in human studies. However, all of our human studies do not show any increased incidence or any increased risk in thyroid cancer. So that's really important to know. Type 1 diabetes, it's not approved for yet because, again, we're really concerned about blood sugar, and they have less stable blood sugar because they don't have an active pancreas. And so while I think we're going to see that change for that group of people, it's technically frowned upon as far as the clinical application and use, just because, again, we would never want to do any damage. So again, beyond diabetes and just obesity, there's many cardiovascular, neuroprotective, appetite, bone, liver, and kidney benefits. Like, that's a lot of benefits from one little medication. I think we're going to see a lot more from the peptide, continue to be developed in mainstream media when it comes to peptides, in large part probably because of these medications. And I think there's a huge future and huge potential for GLP and GIP medications as far as expanding the overall benefit from a longevity perspective. The last thing I'll add, and I'm sure, Alana and I've talked a lot about microdosing these medications. It's really tough from a clinical standpoint because there's not a lot of data around microdosing. However, we're seeing tremendous impacts and benefits. The majority of my patients actually don't have these medications covered by their insurance, and so instead are using a compounded version. And we're having to use far less to achieve the same result as traditional medicine is using with the, kind of trade drugs and kind of maxing out, the dosage. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of what the threshold is, but we're finding that we really don't have to, on most patients, go to the maximum dosage. And I would say that if you are getting these medications from your traditional doctor, you may not need to go up. So if you get these from your traditional doctor and you go through kind of a two-step process and you're losing weight, about 0.5 pound to 1.5 pounds per week, and you're feeling good, you don't have any need to go up. No need to go up. So keep those medications and the dosage low from my perspective and a functional medicine perspective, and work towards that weight loss and health goal. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Julie. That was I like that the whole body approach and effects. And we are gonna take some questions. I do want to start with a question about what is your protocol for qualifying somebody that can go into this medication? Is there a certain way? Is there certain biomarkers that will qualify or not qualify somebody for this?
Yeah, excellent question. So majority of patients that come for this medication have some weight that they could lose. We would never want to give this medication to someone who's, say, underweight, because it will decrease the drive and hunger, and our body needs nutrients. So that's definitely a disqualifier. And then we talked about type 1 diabetes because it's not approved. And then again, family history of thyroid or personal history of thyroid cancer would be a disqualifier. So we are looking for patients who would benefit from a weight reduction. We can look at that from a BMI perspective, but in my practice, we're doing body composition with every single visit for our patients so that we understand what's happening on the inside. And there might be some questions about that as well. I'll follow up too.
Fantastic. Any questions here, Ilana? Blue mic.
Okay, so thank you, Julie. Thank you for coming.
Ilana, can you stand up for
Yeah,
the camera?
so like I was telling Julie, we've already, many of us and a lot of my clients have been going through these different medications, peptides, and from my experience, and maybe you can elaborate, I do feel there needs to be a requirement, whether you want to lose 8 pounds or 40 pounds, then especially I'll talk about the women going into the 40s, 50s, 60s and on, there should be a requirement of eating enough protein and lifting weights because I've seen it all. I've seen these skinny fat girls suddenly, it's not, so when anybody's on it that works with me, I always say, look, you got to eat enough protein, you got to lift those weights. And then also if you can elaborate on like the bone health that you talked about, because I really realize through some bad things that happened recently that this osteoporosis for women, it's like one of this, they call it, the heart thing, the silent killer, but this osteoporosis, this bone density loss, the longer we're alive, especially with women, it's like horrific, and so maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yes, 100%. So this is where we talk about safety, and every person who's on these medications should be eating adequate protein. How do you know if you're eating adequate protein? Well, I would argue that really everybody needs to meet with a dietitian and really understand what are like a supportive and healthy, nutritious diet. We have research, and we've got some really extreme diets on lots of sides, but there's a happy medium. We've got lots of research to support that. So yes, working with a dietitian or someone who understands nutrient needs, and nutrient needs when you're 50, 60, and 70 are very different when you're 20. And so that's why I would also recommend, and most people, your insurance is going to cover a visit with a dietitian. Just because they have a traditional training doesn't necessarily mean that they're not open to conversations. I would say check the IFM's website, so the Institute for Functional Medicine. Try and find a dietitian who gets longevity and health, but also understands the physiologic impacts. So yes, monitoring weight loss is important. So we know that when patients or people lose weight, let's just say it's a 10-pound weight loss, we can expect, based on the data, that a person would lose 70% fat, 30% muscle. We don't want you to lose any muscle. All of the new data that has come out as far as from a longevity perspective says the more muscle, the more lean we are, the longer that we are going to live, right? Peter Attia's, book with as far as like the markers of health, like it's a very important concept to understand. Most women, particularly in my generation or older, have always looked as thinness as being the goal. I do not think that thinness is the goal. Strength is the goal, and it is so vitally important to preventing our health and aging from a really healthy way. So when we look at loss, having body composition done with your clinician is important. So we don't really want to see any loss of lean muscle mass, but a couple of pounds is certainly okay. And when we see that, we see our patients every 4 weeks, because when we see that happening for them, we want to talk about how do we prevent it. It's through a very personalized strength training routine, and I would say a progressive overload. Alana's a trainer. I'm not the trainer, but progressive overload to make sure that we're preventing that weight loss, or excuse me, that lean body mass loss, and that we're losing the right types of fat. Because what happens when we start doing those strength, we don't see the scale change as much, but guess what's happening? We're increasing our lean muscle mass. Where does our blood sugar get used? Get used in our muscle. Grow your quads, grow the biggest muscles that you have in your body, grow your glutes, right? Our brain uses a lot of glucose too. So we need to have glucose, we need to have sugar in our diet. However, it's how do we go about it? So the more we can strength train, the leaner that we can become, the more metabolically balanced that we can. If I had one tip to give to every woman in her 20s, it would be to stop dieting in a calorie deficit and start eating to train the metabolism and grow lean muscle mass. Hugely and critically important. So good point, Alana.
Yeah, and speaking to that same topic, there was a lot of research that I saw about 6 months ago about the GLP-1s affecting weight loss into like people lose, muscle loss, like up to 40% muscle loss.
Yeah, so that happens, I think, for two reasons. Number one, your doctor just gives it to you and says, bye, see you in 6 months to a year. And there's zero support and zero education. Well, what do? You're like, oh, awesome. I'm not hungry anymore. I can just keep eating all that I did before, or what it was that I did before, and not change a thing. So that's super important. So that's one problem why I see people are losing lean muscle mass, is they're just not making any of those health changes. They're not eating enough protein. They're not strength training. And again, the manufacturer recommends that we just blow up the dosage, right? So we start the medication. In 4 weeks, we give you more. In 4 weeks, we give you more. In 4 weeks, we give you more until we get to the top. But all of my patients, particularly women, respond extremely well to this medication. They don't need even half of the maximum dosage. So why would we give that to you? So again, those are some of the main reasons why I think that happens.
Okay, great. We have a question online from Gerard.
Gerard.
Gerard. Hi, Gerard. We can hear you.
Hi. Hi. There was a couple of things. I mean, I want to dittos on weight training, especially for not just women. I know women have this idea a lot of times that, oh gosh, if I lift weights like a man, I'm going to look like a man. No, you can strength train. You can strength train and you'll look like a woman and you'll be beautiful. No worries.
And you'll be strong, which is so much more empowering than just weak and waiting for someone to do something. I always tell, particularly, yes, you're right. Women have a harder time with this, but even what I noticed from my male patients is that they're typically not being as intentional. Working with a trainer is super important. You wouldn't, it's like trying to fix your own air conditioner. Like, I don't know how to do that. Like, I don't know how to program for myself either. Like, I have someone who's programming for me so that I have those benefits. So definitely strength training. You're right. Women are worried about strength training.
They're afraid they're going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. No, you're a female. You will never look like Arnold Schwarzenegger unless you're shooting massive amounts of testosterone. So don't worry about that. Yes. Go ahead and do the squats. Go ahead and do the bench presses. Go ahead and do the deadlifts. Work all the big muscles. But not just women, but especially old people. I'm an old people. I'm 67 years old. Okay. Now I've been on Ozempic, semaglutide. I've been using the peptide for 2 years. It's been great. My cardiologist loves it. My heart's good. Everything's good. My weight's good. My BMI is good. But you've got to do the free weights. You've got to do resistance training because I did lose a lot of muscle. I could bench press a lot before I started Ozempic, but I had a belly like a basketball, right? Now the basketball is gone. My bench isn't so good, but it's really important because old people get sarcopenia. Muscle loss is a huge problem, and frailty is a huge problem for old people. You see old people, they put their arms up and they got toothpicks. It's no good, not healthy. You got to lift weights. You got to do resistance training. It's not just cardio. Cardio is good, but you got to do the weights too. You got to keep that muscle mass. Don't want sarcopenia. Do not want that. Other thing is cost. A lot of people do Ozempic or semaglutide, and they pay a fortune in the United States. I heard a doctor say that people are paying $1,000 a month. I don't pay that much. I pay 600, which is still way too much because I go to a compounding pharmacy, and I don't get the brand name Ozempic. I get a generic. Okay, it's semaglutide peptide mixed with a little NAD plus. For some reason, they have to mix it with NAD plus, which is fine because that's also good for you. But in England, they're paying $100 a month. United States, we're paying $1,000 a month. Me, I'm paying $600 a month. This is a problem in this country. We pay far too much for pharmaceuticals, way too much. We're getting robbed. Okay, this is a problem. So there are other avenues that you can explore. I get some things from New Zealand because it's cheaper through Kiwi Drug. I get Jardians through Kiwi Drug.
I can speak to that as a matter of fact. So thank you because that's a really important point. So the medication, if you were to go to CVS and try and fill the medication, it'd be about $1,000. Okay, so don't do that. In my opinion, I don't think that there's any benefit by having a really beautiful branded, that you're paying for marketing dollars. You're paying for that Eli Lilly and Pfizer ad that are coming across our TV every evening. So there is the trade medication, which is Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, which is tirzepatide, that are you can get from CVS. Okay. Now, if you have type 2 diabetes, I would say talk to your doctor about that. If they haven't already, you could probably get that medication for $23 a month because it's covered by your insurance and you have the diagnosis. So for my patients who have a diagnosis and we can get your insurance to cover it, absolutely, and we should be doing that. So that's one important thing. For patients who don't have the medication coverage, you can use a compounded pharmacy. It's super important that you know the pharmacy that you're working with, right? Because now you can just order medicine online and it's coming from wherever. And I had a patient this week and she's like, I took it, it didn't work. And I was like, well, that's weird.
Yeah, I've heard of that all of the compounding are compounding slightly different.
Yeah, well, it's coming from maybe a pharmacy that's using inferior product because their goal is to make as much money as possible. So that's possible. That's possible. It's maybe coming from an irreputable site. Maybe it's being sourced from another country where you don't know what you're getting. So we use a compounding pharmacy here locally in Tempe that's been compounding for 20 years. They supply medications to hospitals. They have very high standards. They're testing their products and it's a safe way to get a very similar product at a much more affordable cost. For our patients, that's between $350 to $450 a month. I think that $600 a month is still very expensive. And I would say that we wanted to be able to price ourselves appropriately in the market. And so that's what the market currently looks like right now for those medications, about $350.
What's the pharmacy's name?
Oh, Patient Care Infusions. Patient Care Infusions. And so you have to be, I think, working with a clinician who's prescribing through that pharmacy. But what they do is they do a lot of, they're treating patients with antibiotics. So they do a lot of antibiotics and anti-chemotherapeutics. So that's kind of their main, and they also do compounding of GLPs.
Fantastic. Well. Dimitri, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a number of clients that are on this, quite a lot of them. And across the board, they all feel, for lack of better words, like crap. Essentially, they're nauseous, they have headaches, lack of energy, and so on. And my first question is, why is that and can that be avoided? Second question, the muscle loss question was my second question, but I kind of like to know why that happens. What is the mechanism as to why there is muscle loss? And then the third part, kind of unrelated to this, you say it's a peptide, but then you say it's a drug and a medicine. So is it a peptide? Is it a drug and a medicine? What's the difference?
Yeah.
Peptides are peptides, drugs are drugs.
Yeah, yeah, and we kind of use those terms interchangeably. So let me address that one first. So the chemical structure is kind of how we come up with, what type of classification a medication is. Anything that's prescribed is a medication, right? A drug would be maybe something that could be prescribed or not prescribed, maybe used. And so I used a lot of those terms, and forgive me if that was confusing. But a peptide is, you may be familiar with hormones. The chemical structure for a peptide is 40 strings of amino acids. Amino acids are broken down by the protein that we're consuming. They're strung together in a peptide formation. More than 40 is a hormone, and below that is a peptide. So it's just a smaller kind of metric, if you will, is what a peptide is. And so, yes, they're medications. Even though they're natural, things that are natural are medications, like things like estradiol patches that you might be on, or testosterone. Those are still medications, even though they might be chemically similar in structure to what your body is creating itself. So that was question three, part three. Number two, I think, was around muscle loss and lean muscle. Why is that? Anytime these medications are working, it's because a person is in a calorie deficit. Like, it's because of the improved insulin, but anytime we put someone into a calorie deficit, you're essentially burning more energy than you're consuming, right? So if you needed 2,000 calories a day and you were only eating 1,500, that 500 has to come from somewhere. Well, our body is going to turn to its reserves. Like, we all have reserves. It's the fat, and it will also turn to muscle, right, to use as energy. And so that's why we're seeing patients lose muscle too, because it's accessible.
Wait, Dimitri.
You're essentially saying that the loss of muscle mass really has nothing to do with the peptide, it just has to do with the lack of calories, as normal.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's normal because
Well, I know it's normal. It does seem to be more exaggerated. I'm not sure if they lose weight faster or some reason like that, but essentially what you're saying, if I hear you clearly, has nothing to do with the peptide.
Correct. I would
Okay.
say that your clients need to be doing either a DEXA scan or using bioimpedance analysis, like an in-body scan, to be monitoring that. And then the conversation is again about nutrition and about strength training. How intentional are they being in that? Because I have some patients. I myself, I love CrossFit. It's my favorite thing ever. I love being strong. Like, it's my excitement. So anyway, but I have a number of patients who can't come from the CrossFit community. And what I've seen in those people in particular, because they're doing so much strength training, is that they're not losing lean body mass. They're actually gaining it. And so it's really just kind of goes against the whole, you're going to lose muscle mass. Well, if you have the right team, and again, it comes down to the team, I don't think that you have to. And if you do, we want to limit it to as little as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, they're using it like a quick fix kind of thing, just the one thing. Okay, we have. Cure. Okay, sounds good. One question in the back, Marty. Oh,
There was another part of that question. Oh, why do they feel like
okay.
crap? Yes. Anytime you decrease your calorie consumption, there could be some impacts of that. So the main side effects, and we didn't talk about that, of the medication would be nausea, GI upset, constipation, and because you have less of an appetite, guess what else you're not drinking? Water, right? And so and this is, again, you want to have a clinician looking at the whole picture. You don't want to go into a med spa where they're injecting Botox and like, hey, we can make you skinny. Like, no, I'm not part of that. Like, I'm not interested in that at all. I want to be fit. I want to be strong. I want to be healthy. We want to look at a person's thyroid, including like a full thyroid panel. We want to look for vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Because if there are other problems that are happening and we're just addressing the whole appetite, there's so much more. And so that's, I would say, what most people really don't understand is kind of the impact on metabolism, on like, whole health approach. And so make sure that they've had their thyroid checked, that they're drinking enough water, and that they're not taking more than they really need of the medication, and that they're also following the recommended dosing schedule. So one of the things that you'll find on like Facebook communities where it's like, oh, I use mine, I take half a dose twice a week. Well, when you do that, you don't understand the half-life of medication. So take the medication once a week as recommended by your healthcare provider, and get it from somebody who has a license to prescribe, and not, it's not ordering it off online.
Okay, great. Marty?
I have two quick questions. First one, you mentioned compounding the semaglutides.
Uh-huh.
Is that oral?
So there is an oral
Okay.
there is oral.
Okay.
There's Rybelsus, which is a trade name. It's not used for weight loss. And I haven't seen it work well for weight loss either, for blood sugar. And then there is an oral. I have one pharmacy that's prescribing compounding oral here in Scottsdale. I don't love the oral. Like,
Okay.
I sent a patient over the summer with it to travel because he was, on the road, and it was going to be hard to ship to him, and the other medication has to be refrigerated. But I didn't, he came back and his weight was just the same as it was when he left. And so I don't love the oral. I think the injectable is working much better, and that's my preference.
And a second question real quick. If you're taking 0.05 units of tirzepatide for 2 weeks and you didn't notice any change in your craving for sugary foods, would that be unusual or usual? And you're taking it every day.
Are you talking about the compounded version, or are you talking about the
Compounded.
manufactured?
Compounded.
Okay, so it's really difficult to know how much you're taking, because the units on the syringe, depending on the concentration of the medication, I would say if you're not noticing a difference, it means that you need to go up. So the dosage on tirzepatide is 2.5 milligrams. So it just depends on how concentrated the dose. Yeah, that's not my preference. We know how the drug works best, and with half-life, you actually end up achieving way more than that, because of how long it takes the medication to be, metabolized in your system. So I don't know. We know how in my mind as a clinician, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I want to use the data. I want to use my clinical experience. I want to stay safe within the recommendations as well, right? We have lots of data. These drugs have been used for a long time. So we want to do that, and then also get you the impact. So I'd say if you're not noticing a difference, instead try 1.25, which is below that, once a week, and use a dosage that we know clinically should work. Most patients with tirzepatide, 2.5 to 7.5, they usually get a really good impact. And again, you're reaching peak concentrations, so you understand, as a clinician, the way my mind is working, in 2 hours, right? So you should have a good impact after taking the medication in about 2 hours. So anyway, that helps.
Okay, we're going to take one more question here from Lori. Go ahead, Lori.
Okay, so I'm also asking for the same friend. No, really, we started 2 weeks ago on that, what she said, and I'm under the care of a doctor and of an Alana. And so I have two questions, because we're on very minimal and doses. I do not want everything hanging. It already does, so I do not need my skin to hang more. I want to go very slow. And I have lost a little bit of weight, but I've gotten into clothes already in 2 weeks that I have not gotten into when we had our Rad Fest. So that's a plus. But I feel like what Dimitri said, I feel like crap most of the time on it, and it's very minute doses. But I've never liked the feeling of being full. I have kind of a food kind of thing, like an autistic kind of person. But I don't like feeling full, and I feel full. Like, I just feel full all the time, like really full, and it makes me just want to sit down and just like, look. So that's one thing. How can I, not do that? Because I know I don't have the bowel paralysis, but I don't have a good bowel moving either.
Yeah, our patients are working with a dietitian to really understand how much fiber is needed, and then I would say a fiber supplement, adequate water, and then again, with your dosing, when we're taking it 5 days a week, I have no way of knowing like what, because it's like a rolling effect, right? So if I give you 5 milligrams and the half-life is 7 days, it takes 7 days for half of that to go. Now we have 2.5, right? And then you take a little bit more, and it's like, yeah, I don't know, I don't like it. Until there's been more
Okay.
research and more data, and you're telling me you're not feeling very well, I would say thyroid, your supplement regimen, like what are you taking? And not only what are you taking, but do your lab markers look better? Like, do you have iron deficiency? Do you have a B vitamin deficiency? It's,
Yeah.
unless we know,
Yeah.
we're testing for those things too.
Yeah, we are. We're,
Yeah.
or I am definitely testing a lot.
And then the last piece that's super important to all of this is gut microbiome. So medication very much is being used inside of the gut. So if there is gut dysbiosis or imbalance, we have to be managing that at the same time. And it shouldn't be overlooked because typically patients either won't have the expected results or there's already inflammation in the gut, and we've got to fix that concurrently or prior to starting the medication.
So second question is, what is your Facebook, and can we have that address so we can be part of the community?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much. I just want to ask you one thing here this has so many benefits. By the way, as you probably know, metformin causes muscle loss too, they discovered. So,
Yeah.
so these are issues. So you have to, watch that. But, so this has so many benefits, this particular, these drugs that, but you're also saying that if you're not, say, obese or overweight to an extent, that's not safe to use. Is there a way to safely use it? Because I would think that so many benefits of it, creating a better kidney response, liver, heart, all those things would benefit almost everyone to take that who would, because in this day and age with toxins, et cetera, we're all stressed in our organs at some level. So, what's your thoughts on that? Is there a safe way to take it? I mean, now, or what is that, Margie? Is it about being too thin you can't take it, or say, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would worry about someone who has, it is under muscled and very thin taking the medication.
Also very, okay.
Yeah, because of the risk for them to become worse off, right? But at very, very small doses, we don't have the data to support that yet, like those micro doses.
Yeah,
As
okay.
long as you're able to maintain your nutrition and it was something that you were being monitored, I have one patient who is at her goal weight and who has continued to use the medication, but guess what? She comes in and she does that body composition. She does an in-body scan so that we know that she's safely using it and not, headed the wrong direction, because she also has really severe osteoporosis. And so that was one of the other reasons to keep her on this medication, even though she had her healthy weight. Yeah, but she's going to stay on a really low dose of, in her case, tirzepatide.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, somebody might, like me, for example, that I'm a good weight for my height. I'm got good muscle strength, good muscle tone. At the same time, I would be interested as a longevity enthusiast to build more strength in my organs.
Yes.
Right. So would that be something that maybe I could look into as microdosing then to see how that would work for me?
Yes. Again, yes, as long as they're monitoring your weight
monitoring it.
and your
Right,
muscle
right.
mass. Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it sounds like a pretty amazing drug from this standpoint. From what that now you really didn't. I think you said a few things about it, but you really didn't go into what other than say muscle loss, et cetera. Are there any and some people are experiencing not feeling so good, possibly because of the lack of say bioculture or whatever in their bodies or their biome not being good. Could they take would probiotics be something to introduce when you're having something like that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I love probiotics, but one of my favorite things to use for patients who have dysbiosis and bacterial imbalance, any sort of GI issue, is a product called berberine is the main supplement. But the company that I love is from Metabolic Code, and it's called Rebiosis. And so berberine is amazing. Not only does it have a really great effect on blood sugar.
Berberine, okay.
Yeah, on blood sugar, but it also, it's great. You have elevated blood sugar, berberine's great, but it also is very antibacterial. So it can, I use it for about 3 months just to see how symptom reduction has been, improved as far as the GI symptoms. And then it can be continued longer than that. So
Okay.
I love berberine.
Because berberine has some of this.
It's called Rebiosis, Rebiosis. And that product in particular has cat's claw, but like other things like ginger and, garlic are really antibacterial and can treat just natural, bacterial overgrowth most of us are at risk for. So.
Okay. Joe had a question.
Okay. So I'm used to viewing like prescription drugs with a very high like risk reward question mark. And so with this one, you're saying like the risk reward is simple. And so is there like a structural reason why this particular medicine is just less problematic for the body? Is it that it's a peptide?
Yeah, so it is a peptide. And so we're like, forgive me, I forget your name in the back, but one of your members here was telling about using peptides since the 90s and was like really on the forefront of even the last 20 years of these things being developed and for us really understanding. But what's great is that there's so much traction. I would say the one good thing from Ozempic, and it's just that the general population is starting to understand, not just the longevity population, the general population is starting to understand the benefits. And peptides have tremendous impact. I think that the drug companies are motivated to find more peptides and reasons to market them. And at the same time, I think we're going to see less and less use of traditional medications. If we can get to the root, again, what's missing, when it looks like our body wants what it naturally produces. And so if there was a lack of a peptide or a hormone, we replace that, you feel incredible. You feel incredible. And it just has not just one use, like giving you lisinopril for your blood pressure, right? It has multiple uses across many different organ systems. So yes.
So on these benefits for the different organs, et cetera, how much of that is due to the weight loss, do you think? In connection to, say, just the drug itself, helping those,
I don't think that we really understand yet.
That totally,
Yeah, I don't think we understand that yet. The question is, again, weight, inflammation, people are more likely to exercise, and so it's really difficult to measure those variables as an individual. And, in research, we really want to pinpoint one thing. Well, we can be reasonable and say it's not one thing, right? It's never one. It's not for one thing. It's a cumulative effect of all of these things.
So it sounds like it'd be worth microdosing, if nothing else, to find out, right? Because if you don't need to lose a lot of weight and you're starting to increase your kidney, health, et cetera, then you can tell that something's happening, and taking out the inflammation would be the key thing that possibly it could be doing.
Yeah.
But weight loss is connected. When you lose weight, you lose inflammation too, of course.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. You're amazing.
Thank
I think
you.
you've educated us on this subject. Wow.